Hey, sis. Thank you for joining me this evening for another Mindful Money Moment with Mari Moore Life. I am Kivette Minor Kane, your financial liberation expert, and I'm so happy to see you here again this evening. Thank you so much for joining me. We are going to be talking about this evening mental health awareness. As you know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so all month we get an opportunity to kind of familiarize ourselves and remind ourselves about how important mental health really is, being conscious of it, not only for ourselves, but for those around us, those we love, and making sure that we are all checking in. How are we doing in terms of our mental health? Are we suffering with mental illness? Are we making sure that we're getting the care that we need and that we're considering the cost? Because here we talk about mindset and money management. It is all about how your emotions affect your financial decisions so that we help you to create better habits so that you're able to fulfill your purpose and to feel in harmony with your personal desires in terms of quality of life. It's really about being able to maintain that, to build it up, and then to keep it where you want it. And so each week I bring a couple of guests on this show, and this evening I have some wonderful surprises for you. These young ladies are absolutely amazing. Both of them are on the mindset side of this conversation. So I'm going to be bringing in the money side, talking a little bit later on about kind of the cost and balancing out. And I know that they'll bring in some points about that as well. But we've got Dr. Valeka Moore. And Dr. Valeka Moore what does she call herself? I don't know why this escaped me. She works with empowerment through expression. And she is a devoted wife and mother. She founded this therapy center and mind spa with Brilliant One Unlimited LLC. And she also does coaching. She has a publishing firm. She's got a wellness business, and she also offers mental wellness products. So, she is just really covering the field here for us in terms of our mindset and mental health wellness needs. So what she describes herself as a dreamer and visionary. And she's been that way since she was young. And she's passionate about helping others unlock their dreams and establish their purposeful realities. And y'all know we're all about creating the reality of your dreams, right? So professionally, Dr. Valeka is a licensed therapist and certified integrative medicine provider, as well as a life and business coach and speaker. She's also the author of the Mental Detox series. And that's what she is. She is the Mental Detox Therapist. And the visionary author of the Breaking the Brilliance anthology series, or Breaking to Brilliance. And so the stories of triumph and healing within that anthology talk about the various capacities and that we are able to work on and to be able to gain the healing that we need through a mental detox. And so she's going to come, and she's been going to share that information with us. We're absolutely honored to have her here because she's been featured in numerous outlets, including Sheen Magazine, Black Enterprise, ABC, Fox, etc. And she was recognized as one of the Courageous Women magazine's top 25 women in business back in 2018. And I'm sure she's holding up to that title even today. And so we appreciate having her here with us. Our second guest is Diane D Rodriguez. And Diane is a grief advocate, but a grief educator. And so where that comes from, Diane, works with livelifechanges.com. And she considers herself a grief agent, providing a bridge for pain and sorrow to connect with living and grieving, a gatekeeper to intimate and sacred conversations. So she helps people with mental health as well as mental health professionals to be able to work with their teams so they can get out of their own way. Sometimes the professionals are afraid, or we've got our own issues that we deal with, and we get afraid to, work through certain processes with our clients. However, every professional has to have a coach. And so she coaches those grief professionals, those therapists, and being able to manage through their own grief so that they can support their clients with the vast knowledge and skill that they've developed, and being able to really, truly make an impact and make a difference in their lives. And so I'm so glad to have her here with us this evening as well. And so we're going to bring them into this conversation. Hello, ladies. How are you this evening?
Hi. So
I'm
great to
so
be
honored to be
here.
here. Absolutely. It's so fabulous to have you here because, Mental Health Awareness Month is a really big deal, especially now after COVID. There's so much attention that has been given to mental health over the last year, considering the drastic change that was made so quickly in our environments where, we went from being out and about to being shut in and quarantined, in just a couple of weeks without really any notice. And so we've been that way for over a year now. We've seen a lot of folks have experienced some drastic changes, loss of employment, family dynamics have, were strained and pushed to the point. Many families have changed in their shape and form, and how they're showing up, for each other. And so we want to talk about those kind of topics, and be able to understand how can we maintain a strong mindset that will help us to be able to clearly manage our money. Because we recognize that, if we are scatterbrained and kind of all over the place and unclear, then we're going to be the same way in managing our money. We might just be retail therapy on Amazon. And before we know it, we've got, a pile of overdraft fees in our account because of lack of income, and it's like, okay, so how do we recover from that? How do we rebuild ourselves through that process? And I kind of want to start with you first, Dr. Valeka Moore, because as we talk about this, the mental detox is real. And it's something that each one of us, needs to really take into consideration. How can we benefit from that? So first of all, what is a mental detox?
Mental detox. So it is all about decluttering. It's about reflecting, understanding ourselves and the things that need to go, and then how
Mhm.
to replenish ourselves with the things that we actually need to stay. So the mental detox, it actually was a process that started with me.
Mhm.
And just as you were reading Diane's bio, I thought it was so great because, therapists, or professionals, we all need someone too. And, and my process started with me. I have been in the mental health field for 20 years now. And
Mhm.
in 2013, I was preparing to get ready to step out into private practice, start my own business. So it was a time that you would assume was very exciting.
Yes.
I had, great husband at home, great children, what on the outside appeared like a great life. And really on the inside, it was a pretty great life. But my inside wasn't in a great place. And so this is 2013. I've been in the mental health field since 2001. And I'm telling everybody how to get their life together, how to get their minds right, how to live their best life. But there was so much stuff that I had pushed down. There were so many
Yeah.
things that I hadn't dealt with myself as the mental health professional. And it was just one time, it was one day in 2013, around the time that we're maybe setting our intentions for the new year. So this was like maybe about November of 2013. And I was sitting in my office at my last job, and it was like this flood of emotions just came up for me. And
Mhm.
it was everything that I had tried to push down. It's not that it hadn't tried to come up before, but I kept pushing it down. And it was like on this particular day, it was like, okay, you're gonna deal with this today. And from that moment on, I can't really say that I necessarily set any intentions or goals for the next year. But I remember in that moment saying, I can't do next year like this. I
Yeah.
can't continue to go on like this. So that moment began my journey. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is where mental detoxing came from, because I have lived it. I have
Mm-hmm.
lived it as the professional. So in 2017, I believe, is when I brought it to the world, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I have gone through this. I've, done this process. I have learned the questions that I needed to answer for myself to be able to move forward. So someone else probably needs this as well. And so
Yeah.
that's where that process came from, for me. And, and just in regards to, COVID, or just anything, the pandemic, or anything that we deal with, because what I have began to look at now is that, certainly the pandemic has affected many people, but I would be remiss to think that people weren't going through things before COVID, before the
Yeah.
pandemic as well. There were things that people were going through as well, and
But that
COVID
would mean
may have
that would
added,
yeah,
may have added,
exactly.
onto that. And so it starts with reflecting. It starts with that mindfulness, that awareness. That's where our journey has to start, with us knowing, number one, admitting that we're dealing with things, and
Mm-hmm.
then being able to acknowledge, or being aware where change needs to happen.
Yeah, and that's hard, I apologize for cutting in there, but I felt it, yeah, not only during COVID, but anything that we had existing before COVID could have definitely been taken, and magnified times 100 during that time, and we saw that in reports. Some of the reports I paid close attention to were about abusive relationships at home, whether it was parents abusing their kids, or spouses abusing one another. And it's just, that was really critical, in so many cases, where people had to be called, and families were broken up, and going through the different challenges and changes, and then seeing this in the neighborhoods, because people are now home, whereas it might not have been something that anybody paid as much attention to prior to. Now there's nothing else to pay attention to but what's going on in the neighborhood, and so there's a great amount of attention that was drawn into that. And so that makes sense, the fact that you were dealing with your own mental detox and then being able to bring this out. It's so funny, because a lot of our procedures, a lot of our programs, a lot of our processes come from having to work with ourselves, and then being able to share what we've learned with other people. For me here, it's the other women who are going through different life transitions, and one of those transitions is can be dramatic, can be facing, the challenges that we have, and not pushing them down, as you said. And I could relate to that. I know that there are so many women in the audience. I want to hold myself back from saying everybody knows. But I feel like there are so many who can truly relate to that. There's, some point in life, especially, when you've gotten to be, in a field for 20 years or more, then you're able to look back at least on a time when you weren't able to manage the way that you wanted to, based on your own expectations. And so we have to really kind of shift those expectations, even as we've shifted our new normal, through COVID. And so we'll come back to you with some more about the mental detox. I do want to introduce Diane and your grief education, because that is another topic that folks have had to deal with a lot during COVID. I have one girlfriend who told me that she lost 13 people. 13 people, in just a matter of months. It's only been a year. We're not supposed to lose that many family members or close friends, and that's what's happening. And so, what is it that you help to educate the professionals who are now really being overloaded, because there's such a need for therapy professionals, for psychological, assistance and support, throughout our communities at this point in time. So how have you seen that change over the last year, Diane?
So I would say that the way that I have seen it change is actually um, being really heightened. Like people are really understanding grief and what that is beyond just death, dying, and bereavement, right? So a
Mhm.
big majority of what I do is death, dying, and bereavement, and then the other piece of grief education is really bringing in the pieces so that people recognize what grief looks like beyond, right? Because there's this stigma, there's this illiteracy about what grief is. And the stigma is, we don't talk about those who have died. We use soft words like they've passed or they've gone to be with the Lord or I lost someone instead of saying they died, they're dead, they're no longer physically present. So part of the education that I do is really helping normalize that conversation, also
Mhm.
help people how to be compassionate, because when we listen to people's hurts, their deep sorrow, one of the things that we try to innately do, right, is try to fix it or make it better because we're so uncomfortable with the subject that sometimes we don't know how to just hold that sacred silence. And like Dr. Moore was talking about in 2013 for her, when she had that mindset shift that she
Mhm.
that really is grief at its finest. That's the deconstructing and reconstructing of core beliefs, of values, of things that we have um, inadvertently really, trying to put it nicely, really have just had some grievance against our own values and boundaries. Like when you
Mhm.
start resenting people, when you start resenting or feeling bitter, it's because somehow or another you have gone against your own core values and your own core beliefs. And
Mhm.
if we don't take a minute and we don't take that pause to come back and say, hey, what's not working so good? What's
Yeah.
worked better? How can this what one thing can we change, right? Like Dr. Moore was saying, I recognize that I didn't want to continue that cycle. Like there had to be
Mhm.
something that had to shift. And in grief, that's one of the things I think this pandemic has really brought forth is people really understanding how to validate other people's hurts without
Mhm.
having to fix it for them,
Right.
recognizing the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? Because
Mhm.
it's not one and the same. Empathy is I'm right here down in the trenches with you. I
Mhm.
I can hold this space. I might not know what to say, but say it to me anyways, and we'll kind of figure this out together. Your
Yeah.
sympathy is more like, here are my condolences and stay, keep your distance, stay out of my bubble, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, I one of my biggest pet peeves is when I have a potential client call me and they're in a crisis and they've been working with a mental health professional and they've had a therapeutic relationship for quite some time. And then they say to me, but I can't do grief work with them. I can't do the death, dying, and bereavement piece with them. They have already told me that I can't do that, or I don't feel comfortable having that conversation because of the vibe that comes across, right?
Mhm.
And so,
So
um,
what vibe practice you're talking about?
what kind of vibe?
Mhm.
So, so one of the things that we talk about in grief work is that the things that you used to be able to tolerate before grief all of a sudden become intolerable. And
Hmm.
you get really good at reading people's body language, reading people's words. Like you get to know those who say, how are you? And once you start recognizing and being aware of what your grief looks like, you will recognize those who really want to know if you're okay and what
Mhm.
your answer to what that question is, or those who want their answer to the question that they're asking you, if that makes sense.
What do you mean?
For
So
example,
they want you to answer the way that they're thinking as opposed to answering honestly for yourself.
right. It's a difference between
Okay.
surface level responses and deep connectedness, right?
So there is a you can sense, and we all know, kind of the fishing for the right answer,
Mhm.
and it's like what they're comfortable with dealing with, and they'll hold you back from being able to fully express,
Mhm.
or that you feel like there's a wall from being able to do that. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and generally, sometimes that'll look like with something as simple as someone changing the subject once you start answering the question,
Yeah.
or someone starting a statement with the words "at least." That is
Mhm.
of an invalidation of the statement that you just shared. That's a huge that's a huge way of minimizing somebody's grief. For example, my catapulting moment in changing careers, right? Going from something I've always had a heart of service, and I've always have helped. Grief is I'm no stranger to grief. I remember the first time that I saw a deceased person, and I was 4 years old, and I grew up in a very death positive culture and environment.
Mm-hmm.
Grief, supporting grief, the death, dying, the bereavement, and all different types of grief has been, you know, I'm not a stranger to that. And I went from analyzing numbers because my first career was in accounting and finance to
Okay.
analyzing behaviors and grief work. And that came when my own son died, when my only son died back in 2002. And I recognized what grieving authentically meant. And when I would go to doctors or friends or other support networks, and they would say, "You're young, at least you're young, and you can have more children." Yes, but that doesn't replace the 11-year-old that just died, right?
Yeah,
Or
that's that sympathetic disconnection, right?
it's their way of fixing it, trying to make it better.
Yeah.
And it's really, and I'm not saying that it's out of malice. It
Mm-hmm.
really is out of ignorance. It's out
Yeah.
of, and I'm not saying ignorance as um
They just don't know.
intelligence.
Just don't know.
I'm talking about
Yeah.
ignorance with from the lack of wisdom, from the lack of experience. That
Experience, exactly.
comes from an illiteracy. Yeah.
So now, would you say that you would kind of fall into that category before you had lost your son? Or, was there a point in time where you felt like you became more conscious of what grief meant because of your experience?
Well, I say that I thought I was a grief expert until my son died. And then I learned a
Mhm.
whole new world of grief.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about grief is that it looks so different, right?
Mhm.
Recently, I became a divorcee.
Mhm.
That's a whole total different kind of grief. I'm talking
Yeah.
over 3 decades of being with one person and all of a sudden being divorced. That's my whole lifeline. That was my whole life, what I've known since I was a teenager, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but when you do the grief work and you step into to grieving mindfully, right? To leaning into the messy middle, to really recognizing all the domains and all the stressors that come with it, and
Mhm.
have that awareness that Dr. Moore was talking about of of how things show up for you, then you're able to name it. And then you're able to turn around and just be able to lean into that and say, and really recognize your resiliency through some of these challenging moments.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's being conscious, but even beyond the consciousness of, the grief that exists, it's being aware of how to manage it. And that's where I believe you two really work to balance out the whole gambit of our mental health, in terms of especially coping with this COVID situation, the pandemic, and being able to move through it. It's, we've got this grief that maybe we are not even acknowledging as heavy as it is because we've never experienced this before, and we're thinking, oh, we need to just keep on moving forward. And so then what happens is grief built on top of grief. and then we've got a breakdown, the emotional breakdown. And so we get to a place and we just are unable to keep the cap on. It's kind of like the champagne bottle bursts, and now all of the emotion comes out all over the place. So how do we, first of all, acknowledge our grief? What are some steps that people can take to acknowledge their grief once they are even conscious of the fact that they are grieving? And what are some signs that they need to be conscious of to identify, are you in grief right now? A couple of those. And then Dr. Valeka, if you would follow up, please, and help us to understand if we realize now that we've been in grief and maybe we've been holding back or pushing down, how can we keep ourselves from having that, kind of explosion, that emotional overflow once that happens? So would you answer that for us, Diane? How can we identify first that we're even in grief?
So I something that you touched on before is new grief will bring up unresolved grief. So if you've had an experience, say you had a childhood experience, it could be something as simple as losing a pet when you were a child, and mom and dad not wanting you to hurt so bad, and in their empathetic grief, they step out and they go get a pet, another pet, a replacement pet, right? But the conversation hasn't been had about what grief looks like. What do we learn from that? That we don't talk about it, and that when we lose something or someone that we love, they can be replaced. So when you grieve, and that was the message that you received early on, there's going to be confusion. There's going to be this tug of war that goes on inside of you. And grief can take on so many different facets. It can look like anger. It can look like depression. It can look like anxiety. It can look like distraction. One of the things I said early on when we were talking about, it can look like that emotional shopping, right? Let's either numb it, or let's try to feel good. So recognizing grief has to come first and foremost by understanding what grief looks like. Because if you don't know what grief is, I think that right now, the reason that people are so into this grief conversation is because the best time to learn about grief is when you are in grief. When you are looking that out, when you can no longer put that cap back on and compartmentalize your grief and stuff it down, like you were saying. People are then looking for, how do I not feel so bad? How can I get out of this place of confusion? And most people will say, I feel like I'm going crazy. And most people will say, I don't know if what I'm experiencing is normal. And so those are part of your language and part of your story. That might be the first indicator to know that maybe you're grieving.
Right. And so grieving situations can look like just what you said, not always death or bereavement. Of course, during this time, grief is most popularly recognized or most obviously recognized when there's a loss of a loved one. But it can also occur when there's a loss of something that we hold near and dear to us, whether it's loss of a relationship. The person is still alive, but we're grieving because we've lost that relationship, right? And then even for some people, the loss of their employment can cause them to go into grief, and I think the most challenging part of that is at the first stage of grief that's most commonly recognized is shock and denial. It's like people will deny first that they're having these feelings, but we can't ever hide from ourselves. The truth is, when we look in the mirror, are we trying to put on that mask? Are we, putting on this facade in order to make everyone feel like we're okay? So, asking, like, even this month, there's been a special emphasis on when you talk to people and you ask them, how are you? And they say, okay, then you're supposed to respond, No, how are you? So that we're able to really get into pausing for a moment and causing that second level of consciousness to kind of set in, so that we don't just skip over, the denial of, there's something going on with me that is unusual, and I need to take a moment to recognize it, and so really being conscious of ourselves. And I think that would probably be a lead in for the mental detox, Dr. Valeka, for us not to become overwhelmed, so not only just for ourselves, but especially for us as women, we do so much. We do so much every day, all day, and one of the things that I conversation, we were, in a clubhouse room, and I just encouraged everyone, just check in on your sister. Check in on your girl, see how she's doing. She may sound okay. She may be going through the motions, and handling things, just, oh yeah, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And it's like, okay, so how are you really? Like, take a moment. Let's talk. So, get it. Do you have someone that you can get into those uncomfortable conversations with, even if you're not able to, to therapy them through that process, that you're able to make them conscious of the fact that they need to reach someone so that they can therapy through that process. And so what do you recommend for someone who, may notice that in someone that they care about?
So as far as someone noticing that in someone that they care about, I think it's really lending that listening ear, really taking time to ask that question, just as you were saying, Kavette, and just sitting and listening, so if you notice it, if it's your friend or it's your loved one and things seem a little off, because if it's your friend or loved one, you know them to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So when, they're a little more quiet or they're a little more distant, or they're, isolated or just don't seem to want to talk, or, it's just the conversation feels different. So, depending on what the relationship is, I think it's okay to say, are you sure? Are you sure you're okay? And sometimes it does take people, a little while to open up. Or
Yeah.
just depending on how they deal with things, they may say, I'm okay, I'm okay. And, because that's just how they deal with things. So from the person on the other end, I think what we do, instead of pushing too much, what we would do is say, I just want you to know that I'm here if you need to talk.
Yeah.
I want you to know that I'm here, because that then lets them know that you really do care to know, but that you're not going to be too pushy, because sometimes, people can shut down if it feels like you're pushing too much. And and sometimes we can even get offended if we feel like we know that something is wrong with someone and they're not. So then sometimes our response can be, well, okay, well, fine, but just to say simply, I am here. If you need anything or you need to talk, I am here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's very helpful. And I love that you're talking about this and that you brought up the how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Question, because I just wrote an article about that, and I talked about it in the Mental Detox. Because one of the things, and one of the points that I just want to bring up with that is that, sometimes, we don't have to share with everyone how we're doing or all of our business, that it's okay, but what I think is important is that we be honest with ourselves. And I find that that's what doesn't happen a lot, is that we're not honest with the people that's around us. You know, generally it's just, you know, the pleasantries. How are you? How are you? Fine. You know, you keep it moving. Or because you're taking care of so much and so many people, you know, or other things that, you know, it's just like, I can't deal with that right now. I can't
Yeah.
deal with this right now. I know that there's something that, you know, feels unpleasant or doesn't feel good, but I just need to keep pushing through because, hey, if I deal with it, I might break down and not be able to take care of all of these thousand things that I have
But
on my
isn't
plate.
that what we would push ourselves into?
Yep, we
That's
keep pushing
exactly it. It's like
ourselves.
if we keep pushing through and
Yep,
pushing through,
yep,
we're just we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage.
yeah,
You know,
yep.
it's like we're ignoring our natural inclination to say, okay, I'm conscious of this in this moment. I know it's something that I need to deal with. Oh, but I'm going to wait till later.
Yep. And we just keep pushing. We just keep pushing because everything else is more important than how we're feeling, right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, but eventually the lid is going to come off if we keep
Yeah.
doing that. So, you know, it just goes back to that conscious awareness, you know, where we make time because one of the questions that I ask in my intake sessions with clients is, especially women, and most of my clients are women and women in some type of transition in their life. So one of the questions that I ask them is, what do you do for self-care? How do you take care of yourself? And
Yeah.
time and time and time again that I have asked this question, you know, I have had women, the answers have been pretty similar, where it's been, you know, I don't have time for self-care. Self-care, what do you mean? You know, I don't know what self-care is. You know,
Yeah.
that could never happen. Or, you know, women just feeling guilty for inserting self-care in their life. You know, and one of the things that I hear a lot, you know, when I say, okay, I want you to do something for yourself is self-care, and women say, I'm going to try to find some time to do that. And so what I have began doing for the
Yeah.
past few years is we don't find time for self-care. It will never ever come if we're waiting to find time, because even when we get that free moment, we're generally looking for the next thing that we should be doing, right? So
Yeah.
we don't really we don't find the time. So what I have shared or suggested with women is that we make time. We have to make it. We have to make it. And I always say we make it or we dare to take it. Because a
Absolutely.
lot of the time our schedules are so full. It's just so full with stuff that, you know, if I was to ask some women, pull out your schedules, pull out your calendars, your phone, organize or whatever you use, and put you on it, it's like, well, I have all of this. I'll have to wait till next month or this time or somewhere down the road. And that time, you know, never comes because we're constantly filling it up. So I'm like, if your schedule is too full to put you on it, then it is way too full. And something
Yeah.
has to go. And it's not you. Like, it's not at your expense. Something
Exactly.
needs to go because it's too full, because we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and even with that, you know, just taking those moments, whether it's once a week, whether it's once a day, you know, just for like 5 or 10 minutes, because sometimes we have the assumption that self-care has to be like a full day, a whole weekend, or take a whole lot of time. But
Mm-hmm.
even if we're giving ourselves 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes just to sit down and just say, okay, you know what? I felt some frustration today, or I felt some rejection, or I felt some whatever it may have been today. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
What do I need to do to deal with that? Because what's important is that, number one, we do assess what it is, but then we're able to address it,
Mm-hmm.
because that keeps us from stuffing it. And I tell people it's a 72-hour rule. You might not address all of it. You know, you might not get to the bottom of everything or get everything worked out, but to be able to sit down and begin to process it for yourself,
Yeah.
72 hours, because we'll hold on to stuff for 10 or 20 years that we haven't
Girl.
processed. So
Mm-hmm.
72 hours before your mind starts talking you out of being able to, you know, deal with it or work through it. So
Yeah, I had a conversation with a new client the other day, mom, who, was talking about, being able to maintain with homeschooling for kids, starting up a new business and, making sure that she's keeping all these things in balance. And I said, well, how are you doing? And what are you doing for you? And so we were able to kind of work it out. So she understood, look, you need to take, 10 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, and 10 minutes for this. You cut out 30 minutes in the morning or in the evening for you. You can choose when it is. It doesn't have to, I'm not trying to, switch up your schedule or make it uncomfortable or inconvenient for you. You just have to do it. But the suggestion is to make sure that we put it in our calendars. Every one of us has a cell phone, every single one of us, and we need to set that reminder for the same time every day. And if you can only take 5 minutes, it's still 5 minutes. Do a breathing exercise, do some journaling, take a moment to literally shut down everything and just be for 5 minutes. Like that is so healing in and of itself. Before we get to the point where we're hospitalized and we can't take care of our kids, and then they have to figure out what they're going to do without us, or worse, if we pass away because we've had a stroke or a heart attack or something because we've pushed down those emotions and held on to it and it manifests physically, and then we have to deal with that. It's for me personally, at this point in my life, that's what I think about. And my father passed away from a heart attack, so he was in the middle of the workday, and it's just like, okay, so I don't want that to be me. I don't want to be, working so hard that I work myself to death, literally, and none of us wants that. And so it is absolutely pertinent that we take an opportunity to consider what are the consequences of my not taking self-care time, of my not taking 5 minutes to breathe or to journal. If I've got so much going on in my head and I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need to write that down. I need to get it out. I need to identify where those feelings and emotions are coming from so that I can then know how to ask for help. Because even if I don't know how to help myself, sometimes we can do little things like the breathing exercises and the journaling or take a nice walk, and that'll help us to deal with the moment. But we, just like you said, dealing with that buildup over time, we don't want to have that continue to overwhelm us. And one way that can overwhelm us is if we're, not counting the cost, the financial cost of it. Yes, Diane, you wanted to make a comment.
Actually, I wanted to jump in real quick to add to that, because I know that with working with women specifically, because we're all multitaskers, because we're caregivers and nurturers, we feel obligated that we have to do it all. And I run across this a lot as women saying, I don't have the time. And having that conversation that you're bringing up right now, saying, okay, well, what would it cost you if you didn't make the time? But sometimes it can be something as breaking it down even smaller than that. For example, I can't tell you how many women I will ask, do you go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom? And they will, if they're in the middle of something, they're going to the bathroom so that they can finish the task that's at hand. That's an act of self-care right there. That's an easy act of self-care. That's not going to take 5 minutes. That's not going to take 10 minutes. That's not going to feed into that story that I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
We can go back a little bit further than that. We can also take a look at that as far as hunger, right?
I was just thinking, like, are we feeding and hydrating ourselves on a regular? Girl, that is that's one of the first things to go.
How many people skip going to bed at time? So we're talking about self-care, going back to those stress management places of good nutrition, of physical exercise, of deep hygiene, of relaxation, and that's all part of self-care. So I believe it's really important. And the other thing is, if you want to go deeper on just the superficial questioning that people relate to, like Dr. Moore was saying, that when you say, how are you? And you're saying, if they respond with a superficial answer, ask them again, how are you? One
Mhm.
way that I kind of even circumvent that whole thing is either asking them, how's their heart? Like, how's their heart space? Or how's their spirit?
Mhm.
Because when we're feeling down, that affects us in different ways. So even changing up the language kind of tricks the mind.
Yeah.
And it makes them do a double take on, wait, what did you say? So thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that
Absolutely.
piece up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing as well. You ladies have absolutely helped to bring another level of consciousness to this, with helping us to understand what we need to be conscious of, not only for ourselves, but for our family and our loved ones, so that we're able to help and support and assist them in working through their grief, and making sure that we don't have those mental breakdowns, but we need to do the mental detox beforehand. And when I heard the mental detox, I'm gonna tell you, Dr. Valeka, I thought about, doing a physical detox, because I just participated early on, the end of last month, and the beginning of this month, in some physical detox. I did a master cleanse, and I've done some water fasting and things like that. And I realized how much I was able to really get rid of in terms of the toxins in my body, really being clear, not just feeling better physically, but being clearer in my mental capacity, in my mind, being able to manage my emotions, and being able to work through processes for my business better, and doing that physical detox. Now, what would you recommend is our remedy, or well, I know you got that in your book, is mental detox. But can you give us just a little sneak peek at what we can do, maybe those first couple of steps?
Yes. So we've been talking about it today. So it's reflecting, it's understanding what is there that needs to come out. One of the tools that I give women to do is, number one, think of 3 emotions that you felt over the past week or two, or the past month, or they may have been there even longer. And just think about what those emotions are. Once you are able to acknowledge those, then what is causing them? And that's where it comes to that addressing that I was talking about. So when we understand what the emotions are, then we can move further to what's causing them, and then we're able to address them after that. But we actually have to take that step, because sometimes, we become mindful, but we don't take the steps. We don't take the action. So sometimes what we'll say is, well, this would be the steps, but I know I'm not going to get this. And I tell women, take those barriers out of there. What would the answer be if you're able to get it? Let's just say you were able to get it. What would those things be? Because I think when we put it on the table sometimes, then we're able to kind of begin to work through it, to say, okay, you know what, this is really what I need. And so, okay, maybe I can work through that. So, so I like to be able to look at those things. What are the things to be able to work through? And then just some more practical tools, of course, because that you mentioned one is writing it down, journaling things, journaling how we're feeling, journaling, just what's going on in our minds, because sometimes our minds are so full of clutter. And because there's so much clutter, like, I mean, it just feels so overwhelming, and we're sometimes not even getting to the bottom of what's really there. So I tell
Yeah.
people, get your journal and just write, because writing is so therapeutic. It can be so healing. And, and something that is very important with the journaling is the way that it feels up here is the way that your journal should look. Sometimes we have the cute little journals. We're trying to keep them nice and neat. That was my story, but it's not nice and neat up here. So it's just about getting it out, not overthinking it, just getting it out as it's sitting here. So journaling is, something that I feel is a very important and helpful step. Meditating is going to be very good as well.
Mhm.
So allowing yourself to sit, allowing
Absolutely.
yourself to sit and to
Absolutely.
think, what is there, what is up there, because what we'll hear people say all the time with meditating is, oh, meditating is hard, I can't do it because my brain is so busy, I can't do it. But what meditation truly is becoming conscious and aware of our thoughts and focus thinking. And so, so we're not going to be just perfect at it, because what I tell people is, when we meditate, it really shows us how busy our minds are.
Yeah.
It shows us
Yeah.
how busy our minds are. And it also shows us the things that really do need to come up, the things that we do need to focus on. Because when you're just trying to sit there and be still, everything is like coming up in addition to the things that you think you should be doing at that time.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
but things start to come up. So meditation is really good for bringing the thoughts up, because all emotions are thoughts. They start as thoughts, and
Mhm.
then a chemical is produced, and then we feel those emotions. And so it's
Exactly.
so important to get to the bottom of the thought. What is the thoughts that are coming up? Because then that other side of meditation is that affirmative thought. And so
Mhm.
those thoughts that you're trying to shift or you're trying to change, you can start sitting and meditating on those. So whether it's scripture, whether it's affirmations, whatever it may be for you,
Yeah.
that you sit and you focus on that. And this doesn't have to be 30 minutes, an hour. You can start off with 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and just work your way up. So those are some good starter strategies. And then you ladies were talking about the how often do we not eat, or are we not hydrating? Like,
Mhm.
those are so big because of the mind body connection. So we can't ignore one part of ourselves and take care of the other. Like, we got to take care of all parts. So the hydration, we got to do that. We got to do that,
I'll
because
tell you one
stress,
thing.
because
I'll tell
stress
you- Yeah.
causes dehydration, and dehydration causes stress.
Well,
It's
the
a
stress.
cycle.
It's just
What we're
like,
putting in our body, if we're putting sugary foods, carbs, a lot of that stuff, it is causing inflammation. And
yeah.
so with inflammation in our minds, we're feeling more anxious, we're feeling more depressed and things like that. So that plays a big part, as well as exercise and some other things that you said,
Mhm.
that which are so
Mhm.
important.
Yeah, so you said you hit on some really good points here in terms of the physical things we need to pay attention to. The inflammatory foods, sugars that can create mucus, and sometimes we think, oh, I can't even focus, or why can't I get my thoughts clear? And it's because your head is full of mucus from the sugar you've been taking and eating ice cream and cookies trying to feel better.
Yeah.
How do I know? Because I've been there. We did that.
We all probably have. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Me too.
And yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's those paying attention to those kinds of things which can actually support us in multiple ways. It helps us to manage when we're paying attention to our emotions. It helps us to pay attention to how we're doing physically, because like you said, our thoughts create the chemical reactions that cause our feelings or our emotions, and then our reactions can cause the physical consequences of those decisions and those feelings based on what we choose to do in response. And is it going to be a traumatic response, or is it going to be a healing response? That's what we have to ask ourselves. It's going to be one or the other, and we want to make sure that we're supporting our own healing, because we have to put ourselves first in order to serve others well. And I constantly remind this audience that we want to serve from the overflow. We don't want to be depleted and half full, because half full means you didn't gave up way too much. You need to be keeping yourself full up to here and then serving everybody else from the overflow. And so make sure that you keep yourself full. One of the ways that I was able to do that for myself during the time grieving from my father's death back in 2018, and even today, it's like sometimes I tell people and they laugh, but I have reminders in my phone to eat 5 times a day.
Mhm.
Yep. I eat 3 meals and 2 snacks. And because some days, I'm telling you, I will be sitting in my office and I get so consumed with what I'm doing that I'm like, oh, and then I end up with a headache and I'm like, oh, why is my head hurting? Oh yeah, I forgot to eat. But I have to pay attention to my reminders. And so now what I found, because I've been on this routine for so long, I'm actually eating a little bit before the reminder. I'm like, oh yeah, my body knows it's time for me to grab a snack. And I don't eat a whole lot. It doesn't have to be a full meal. But if we have a couple of oranges, you eat an avocado, you eat a banana, you eat some raisins, something that has some rich nutrients that can, help to nourish us and nurture us through the process, because those nourishing foods are what give us the strength. And like you said, the hormonal balance in order to be able to get through, and then on the financial side of that is where I help our audience be able to pull everything together. Sometimes our finances are the reason that we're grieving. Sometimes our finances are the reason that we are having an emotional overload, because we have not paid certain bills, for a long period of time, or we've got this big thing coming on us and we're like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to handle that. So we freeze. And instead of taking money to put towards, maybe it's a small amount of money that we could put towards this huge thing to actually pay it down, we say, oh, it's not going to make a difference. Let me just go buy them. And all that DoorDash and Instacart can sometimes hurt us if we're not making it out to the store. We need to make sure that we're balancing all of that on the other side, to make sure that we're not hurting ourselves financially in the process of trying to heal. But then at the same time, we have to care for ourselves. So let's make sure that we understand what our budget looks like, so that that's not another stressor for us. I thank you so much, ladies, for being here this evening to share this information. I don't know where that feedback is coming from. Hold on one second. That me? Okay. So thank you, ladies, for being here this evening to share with us, so that we're able to understand, not only from you, Dr. Valeka, how we're able to mental detox so that we don't have that emotional overload, but also from you, Diane, so that we're able to understand how to manage our grief. It's those two things that help us in the balance to be able to really make a significant difference. And so we're going to continue to grow on this. And any closing words or remarks for our audience, ladies, how they can connect with you? I actually have the information at the bottom of our screen, so make sure that you connect with both Dr. Valeka Moore and with Diane Rodriguez, Diane D Rodriguez on Instagram. And of course, you can comment here. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out and make sure, and I'll make sure that your message gets on to them and they'll be able to respond to you. So thank you, ladies. Any closing comments, Dr. Valeka?
I just want to say, ladies, take care of yourself. You are your most valuable asset. So definitely make sure that you take care of yourself. Self-care doesn't have to be hard. Just make sure, what I'd like to tell ladies is just include yourself in your day for at least 1 minute. That could be looking in the mirror and telling yourself, I love you. That can be lighting your favorite candle. That can be just you, where you've given out and poured out so much in that day, just making sure that you do something for you. So just make sure that you see that you're your most valuable asset and take care of you. So great.
Absolutely.
Being here. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. And I look forward to having you back again soon. All right. So Diane, any closing remarks on how we can manage our grief and what you'd like for these ladies to remember to put into action?
Yes, ladies, first of all, I'm so grateful to have made new connections and to be able to be in an environment with powerful women like yourselves, to where we can come together and edify and just really empower and support each one of us. And one of the things that I like to leave people with is that mindful grieving is meaningful living. Find the
Mm.
meaning in your living. Live your day every day. It doesn't matter if you're grieving, you can be grieving and living.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Diane, for sharing that. And I will be with you ladies in just a moment. So thank you all once again for joining me for Mindful Money Moment. This has been a wonderful evening, absolutely fulfilling, helping us to understand how we're able to manage not only our grief, but also to ensure that we are paying attention to ourselves so that we don't have to have that emotional overload by doing a mental detox. So feel free to reach out to me for any more information from either one of these ladies. We would love to be able to share more information with you. I look forward to being able to coach you through the process and understanding how to manage your money once we're able to get our mindsets reset and ready to roll. So thank you so much. And you all have a wonderful evening. We'll see you here for another Mindful Money Moment. Take care.